Mitsurugi Kinya had just won the World Championship of the widely popular online game Night of Giants. The hosts were in awe, captivated by his performance, amazed at how he had navigated the fierce battlefield of the game with unwavering precision and heart-stopping strategy. But even as the celebration raged around him, Kinya stood there, hollow, unable to feel even a flicker of joy. The victory felt weightless. He had fought through impossible odds, conquered machine after machine, emerged triumphant in a game where only one out of millions could succeed. But despite the glory, the praise, the thunder of his name rolling through the air, he couldn't bring himself to smile. There was a reason for that, something the world could not see. At the end of the game, he had been forced to make a devastating choice, to save only one of the two heroines he had grown to love. Kaguya Akagami, the cold but secretly kind-hearted warrior, and Reina Sylphide, the emotionally honest and fiercely brave girl who always met his gaze with unwavering strength. He had wanted to save them both. No, he needed to save them both. But the game had cornered him. And now, even with the world watching and applauding him as a hero, he could feel the weight of the one he couldn't save. When the interviewer asked him about his feelings, expecting a victorious speech or emotional gratitude, Kinya instead asked a quiet, heartfelt question. Was there any way to save both of them? The host froze. Their smiles faltered. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Instead of answering, they hastily concluded the interview, citing the start of a new game round as an excuse. Kinya sat there in silence. That question, unanswered, began to eat at him. It awakened something deeper, older, rooted in pain. His thoughts wandered back to his past, back to his own life, a life that had never been kind. His parents had divorced when he was still in middle school, citing the simplest, coldest reason imaginable. They had fallen for other people. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the aftermath. Neither of them wanted custody of him. Neither wanted to keep him. So he ended up alone, left behind in an orphanage like an unwanted object. The pain of abandonment never left him. And when he entered high school, he faced a new kind of cruelty. He had once tried to stop his classmates from bullying another student, thinking he could make a difference. Instead, he became their new target. The bullies turned their malice on him with unrelenting cruelty. Teachers turned a blind eye. No one stood up for him. No one said his name with kindness. Even when he tried to contact his parents, they rejected him outright. "You're not needed anymore." The words carved themselves into his heart. He was alone. There was no one to wake him up in the morning, no one to smile at him, no one to call his name. In those days, he often wondered if living was worth it. It was during this bleak chapter of his life that he stumbled upon Night of Giants, the game that would change everything. And in that game, he met them. Akagami Kaguya and Reina Sylphide, two girls who didn't just fight beside him but saw him, who called him by his name with sincerity and care, who treated him not as a mistake or a burden, but as someone worth something. He fell in love with both of them, not out of confusion, but because they had become his salvation, his reason to live. From that moment on, school and reality faded into the background. He spent every waking moment with them in the game. It was the only place he felt alive, but the game's cruel structure demanded a price. He had to choose one of them. No matter how he played it, no matter what angle he tried, there was no path where both could survive. Until that interview, when the host's hesitation, the flicker of uncertainty in their response, hinted that perhaps there was a way, that maybe he had missed something. A spark lit inside him, and with new resolve, he began his mission. He blindfolded himself to heighten his focus, forcing his mind to perceive the game's mechanics beyond the surface. He studied the algorithms, analyzed every layer, every possibility. Over and over again, he failed. Over and over again, he broke down, crushed by the futility. But he never gave up. He couldn't imagine a world without both of them. The pain of loss was already too familiar. He would not let it consume him again. After a grueling, soul-shattering journey of trial and resilience, he finally did it. He found the path. He saved them both. But before he could even catch his breath, the game threw another twist at him. If he wanted to truly protect them, he would have to face new challenges, ones not bound by pixels or code. The game's creator presented him with a final proposal. Would he be willing to save the world? Without hesitation, he agreed. For them, he would do anything. In an instant, the ground beneath him opened, and he plummeted into darkness. When he opened his eyes, the headset was gone. The usual quiet of his room replaced by distant, unfamiliar sounds. A letter lay beside him. With trembling hands, he opened it and read the words that changed his reality. "Welcome to Asgard Academy of Knights." Disoriented, he stumbled to the door. As he stepped outside, his breath caught in his throat. The buildings, the sky, the aura, it was unmistakable. He wasn't in his world anymore. Somehow, impossibly, he had crossed into the world of Night of Giants, the world he had always idolized but never believed was real. And now, it was his. He then spotted a uniform lying neatly on the bed. It was instantly recognizable. He had seen it countless times in the game. There was no mistaking it for anything else. Just as he reached out to touch it, a soft chime echoed in the room. It came from an in-game device placed beside the bed. When he opened the notification, he saw an invitation to attend the entrance ceremony scheduled for 9 p.m. The date flashed on the screen was April 1st. He glanced at the clock. It was already 8:16. Without wasting another second, he quickly donned the uniform, then rushed out towards the academy. Upon reaching the vast and awe-inspiring campus, he was immediately struck by how much it resembled the digital world he had come to know. But before he could fully take in the surreal experience of actually being there, a royal car pulled up at the entrance. From it stepped a regal young man, Lord Asgard, the second prince of the Asgard Empire. Kenya was caught off guard. Though he had seen the character in the game, he had never paid much attention to him, mostly because the prince never piloted a Kyoji. But here, in this world, the prince radiated an aura of power and importance. A stern voice snapped him out of his reverie. A nobleman walking behind the prince approached him and questioned his boldness. How dare he stare so unabashedly at the royal guard? And more importantly, why wasn't he kneeling like the rest of the second-class imperial citizens? Kenya looked around and noticed, for the first time, that many of the Asgard trainees were kneeling respectfully. Confusion clouded his mind, but then a faint memory flickered, an early scene in the game where the player had to fight against a mob as a test of worth. Yet, the concept of second imperial citizenship hadn't meant much to him back then. When he inquired about it, the nobleman pointed to a ribbon wrapped around his arm. It indicated his affiliation with the Second Imperial Army. Then, in a stern voice, the Lord commanded him to kneel. But Kenya, lost in thought and trying to make sense of it all, didn't respond. The nobleman's face twisted with fury as he drew his sword, ready to punish him for his defiance. Before the blade could strike, someone kicked Kenya out of harm's way. A girl stood between him and the furious noble, apologizing profusely and calling him an idiot. Her intervention seemed to quell the tension slightly. The prince raised his hand to stop the confrontation, declaring that he didn't want to witness bloodshed so early in the morning. The noble, however, was not so easily pacified. He argued that Kenya's defiance warranted a punishment. But seeing someone already taking responsibility, the prince allowed the matter to drop. The noble begrudgingly agreed, commenting that the prince's kindness had saved Kenya this time. The girl turned toward him and pushed him to the ground, demanding that he apologize. Kenya looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. It was Kaguya Akagami, the same Kaguya who had once saved him in the game. Overcome with emotion, Kenya's eyes welled up with tears, and without thinking, he leaped to his feet and hugged her tightly. She froze, then kicked him away in shock, calling him not only an idiot but a pervert. Flustered, he explained that she reminded him of someone he had recently lost. Her expression softened, and she told him that she understood his refusal to kneel. She shared the same anger deep inside her, but for the sake of survival in this world, they had to play along. For now, they had to rush inside. The entrance ceremony was about to begin. Reality sank in deeper with every step. This was Yamato, a once proud nation now reduced to the 13th colony of the Asgard Empire. Their people had been conquered, rendered powerless before the might of the Asgardian Kyoji. The empire had swept across the skies and lands with terrifying efficiency. Now, Kenya and others were considered second-class imperial citizens. Though they were granted privileges such as training at the academy, the expectations were grueling. The empire's ambition was to rule the entire world, and their recruits had to contribute to that vision with blood, sweat, and obedience. At the grand entrance ceremony, the atmosphere shifted dramatically when a towering figure stepped onto the stage. Sieg Silfide, known across the continent as the War God, stood before them. His commanding presence silenced the murmurs of awe. Until that moment, many had only heard stories of him, but now he stood in the flesh. He declared that he would be supervising them, and that within his class, merit alone would define their value. There would be no distinction between first and second-class citizens. Talent would be the only metric of worth. Kaguya glanced sideways and noticed the same flicker of defiance in Kenya's eyes that she had seen earlier. She narrowed her gaze. Who was this guy really? Why did he seem so different, so sure of himself? And hadn't he called her by name earlier? Was he a big shot pretending to be a nobody? She didn't have time to answer her questions before the ceremony ended, and they moved to the classrooms. As she took her seat, Kenya entered and walked straight toward her. Without asking, he sat beside her and introduced himself properly as Mitsurugi Kenya. She glared at him and asked who gave him permission to sit next to her. He replied casually that they should get along as Yamato people. She snapped at him, warning him not to say such things, as it was dangerous, even punishable. Their tense exchange was interrupted when some students announced the arrival of Lord Sama. Everyone quickly knelt. Lord Sama entered with his usual regality and addressed the class, saying he had no intention of interfering with their training. Kagaya leaned toward Kenya, teasing him that he finally knew how to bow. He shrugged and replied that he was just getting used to it, as when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He didn't plan on dying just yet. He had a mission to accomplish. As he spoke with a glint of excitement, he unintentionally grabbed her hand. She yanked it away and warned him not to try any pickup lines on her. She didn't want to create a scene. But for Kenya, the mere touch of her hand was electric. It felt as though he had brushed the gates of heaven. Suddenly, a commotion rippled through the class. All heads turned toward the entrance. Walking in with quiet grace was Reina Sylphide. Her long silver hair shimmered like moonlight, and her presence demanded attention. The entire room fell silent, captivated by her elegance and beauty. Kenya leaned toward Kagaya and whispered, asking if that wasn't the Ice Princess. Kagaya stared at him, wide-eyed, surprised he even knew her name. Reina Sylphide, daughter of Sieg Sylphide and a prodigy KG pilot and on par with the Holy Knights, had just entered their world, and once again, his heart stirred.